Hello everyone, it's Infinity Gamer here, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about the new Unicool plastic resin models from Corvus Belli. Now before I get into a comparison of how they stand up to the Cyocast and white metal minis, I've got to do the official announcements. First of all, this is how they came to me, it was very nondescript. It came with the Bakunin and all of that sort of stuff, and I didn't realise that they were actually heading my way. So this was a bit of a surprise. But other things that came with that, as well as the goodies that you can maybe make out over there, was some information from Corvus Belli to help explain these Unicool models and why they're going ahead with those and what it means for the business going forward. So I want to address this stuff before we actually go into the model itself. If you don't want to worry about like how it's going to impact you, the models that are coming in the future, and you just want to go straight to the comparison, feel free to do so, but this stuff's good to know too. So I remember when I did the review of the Cyocast models, and that was the first time Corvus Belli had really thought about moving away from metal miniatures, and understandably the fan base had some very mixed reviews around that. Corvus Belli then limited the Cyocast release, in case you're familiar with that, to a lot of the bigger models, so tags and large remotes and things like that. They never actually went as far as to do an S2 in main public release that was out of Cyocast. Many reasons abound as to why that might be. So the fact that in this set they've included an S2 model shows that they're really trying to push the boundaries in terms of detail capture with new materials. But let's get to some of the really important stuff from Corvus Belli. And I'm going to be reading out a lot of this directly so that you're hearing it verbatim from the brand itself, and then I'll give you my opinions on a few of these things. So a couple of the things here is that the material from Unicool is a mixture of resin and PVC, which doesn't give us a lot to go on because, you know, resins and even like a PVC and even plastics in general are generally mixed components. So until you get down to a bit of a breakdown as to what makes it up, we don't necessarily learn a lot from the fact that they are resin and PVC. What we do know, if you're familiar with this, is that the Aristean models are PVC. Now the quality there is mixed. I'm not going to defend them and say that they are the best detailed, the highest quality minis out there, but they're good enough for some people and for something like Aristean. But I do think there's a chance that something like PVC limits the detail that you can put forward on certain minis, just because of how the molds or the process actually works. Then we look at resin. That's kind of what we're looking at with something like Cyocast, although that's a thermoplastic, which you would be familiar with if you bought a tag recently. That's where they've been using Cyocast quite extensively, is on some of their larger models. I've got the new Agamemnon sat back there, and I've had things like the Marut, also cast. There's pros and cons to it, as you would have seen in my Cyocast review video, but this is being more directly compared to the thermoplastic Cyocast that we have seen before. What it tries to highlight here is that it is a harder material than the thermoplastic you're already familiar with, but it's not a fragile material and is also flexible. It says here when it comes to filing and cleaning the pieces, you'll not encounter any problems and assembly is quite simple. On the other hand, the glue we recommend using to glue the pieces together is cyanoacrylate, which I believe from the Cyocast instructions is most superglues. Definitely check to make sure your superglue has cyanoacrylate in it, but I'm fairly confident that most superglues have that. I've been using superglue on my Cyocasts with cyanoacrylate in them, and that's worked really well. And I'll be doing the same when I assemble these minis. Another thing that is really important here is how we address the materials in the product lineup going forward. So we'll have some minis that will be white metal, which is the standard, like how Corvus Belli makes most of its S2s at the moment and a lot of its other minis as well. Then we'll have thermoplastics in the range. This isn't replacing thermoplastic. This is not meaning that Cyocast is going anywhere. Cyocast will continue to be used, and generally I reckon all of the existing models there won't be replaced with Unicool. They'll probably carry on with Cyocast, but that's not written here. What is written here, that gives us an indication as to how Unicool is going to fit in amongst the current manufacturing process, is that in no case, and this is verbatim here, in no case will it mean that we will stop manufacturing in metal. It is well known that we have an infrastructure in our factory where metal machinery is the main protagonist. We like working with metal. Likewise, releases in thermoplastic will be maintained. So that means that we will have 3 different materials in the Corvus Belli product lineup going forward. Now, what does that mean in terms of like how you choose your models and things like that? What Corvus Belli have said in this release is that from now on, some miniatures may be produced in Unicool. In the online store, we will indicate which products are made of metal, thermoplastic or plastic resin appropriately. For 2023, we only plan to produce the alternative versions of the Marut and Hassassin AR in plastic resin, including the new ITS special pack that will be released next April. So those are the two miniatures that I've received today, the limited edition Marut and the AR, the Hassassin AR, and that is what I'm going to be showing you now. Okay, so as promised, I've got a few of the different types of models here. I'm just going to do a small adjustment there because I feel like the lighting, I've got two of my studio lights set up and I'm trying to get them so that you can basically get the best view possible of these minis, and I've got a bit of a harsh cast on them so that if there is a flaw, you should be able to see it. So I've got a bit of contrast shadow here. So I've got the Unicool minis there, Agamemnon you can see there, and then the Diaphos from the Bakunin starter box thingy here. So first off, I'm going to start with straight out of the box, like these haven't been touched apart from opening the box, the Bakunin white metal that we're used to here. So again, I'm not picking flaws because I mean, most people do like, obviously, the white metal finishes here. So, but one thing I do find with white metal, regardless of which mini it is, it's sometimes quite difficult to tell what's like a flashing and what's a detail until it's primed, and then it's kind of too late. So like with this one, I mean, you've kind of got the insides here. There's bits of flashings in there that are maybe going to be quite hard to clean up. That's just the coat of, I believe it's, oh, they've usually got the people on here. Oh yeah, Agatha Wabara. What else we got here? So this will be the head chest piece. So yeah, annoying flashing in there. I think you can just see that. Yeah, just in there on the shoulder, you can see that, which is going to be, I mean, it's not impossible to get off. Like, none of this is impossible. I love the fact that Corvus Belli are actually pretty good with their placements of flashings and things like that. It's not too annoying to get things cleaned up. And what we've got, the leg there, is there anything, I mean, that is a flashing there, but it's also on a bit of detail. And then we've got, it looks like, oh, this isn't the same model, it's a different model. Yeah, so typically what I find with CB's models is that there's like a mold line that runs straight down the legs, which on some minis are not an issue, but on others it's really annoying. Nice when it's on like an exposed armor plate, and then it's actually fairly easy to remove. Annoyingly, what the camera's picking up there is actually like an intentional detailed seam. Let's see if I can see it on if there's one on this leg. Yeah, you can. Got to rotate it and try and catch the shadow perfectly. But actually the seam that you're seeing in there, that indent, it might be a detail. You know what? I don't even know anymore. I don't even know what's a detail and what's not. So yeah, I suppose, I know with some of my Morats, I was really struggling with, yeah, having that seam line on the armor, fine on the raised areas, but then not so good elsewhere. So that's a white metal mini. Now let's get the Unicool resin out. Plastic resin. There we go. I'm going to go, no, let's go for this one first. I want to go straight into the detail bits. I think one of the things that gets me straight away, I know I'm going off to the side, but that's a little bit because you're in a holder. That means I can't see everything. Okay, so with Cyocast, I want a little thing that I can use to point at stuff that isn't going to be too distracting. I don't have anything. So with Cyocast, those sorts of grates and vents there would be a prime area where the Cyocast would fail. Like, you would lose so much detailing. How close can I come? That close. You'd lose so much detailing in there with the Cyocast. Now it looks as though there's a really faint mold line near the toe. You can just see it there, near that where the big toe would be. Then we come onto the side and there's the same sort of vent detail This is the first bit of like lost detail I can see. Can you see that like fuzzing just in there? But that's it. Oh, can you see under there? Get you into the light. Come to the light. Step away from the light. There's like ribbed, like, yeah, it kind of looks like pipes on the underside of the legs. That is spot on. That might be slight lost detail there. But this is actually my first time looking at the Unicool model up close. And I've got to jump to this because what's impressed me is that so many of these like circles I've noticed that Cyocast sometimes struggles with, circles, domes, elevated areas, really harsh detail. Like in between that bolt and that wheel there, it goes all the way, the cast goes all the way down. Maybe if I turn it side on, you'll see. There we go. Like it goes all the way into like the base there. Apart from that little bit of fluff, which is going to be so easy to remove, there's nothing, there's no lost detail. It's so crisp right into the depths. The same where the foot meets the vent. That's another area where we typically see lost detail, but it actually goes right under and is so crisp. Let's get to the good stuff, shall we? Where are we seeing lost detail here? I'm silent. Oh, here we go. Finally found one. Here, oh, can you see? You might just be able to see it moving under my finger. There's a little bit of excess there, which has actually come off on my finger, and then now there's nothing. Like now there is nothing there. Like that detail here. Can you see that? Where it kind of like, there's like the armor over the, where the hamstring would be, then there's the shin armor, and it just dips in. Usually we see, none of these models that they've sent actually have similar details, but usually they'll have like a little oval indent, and that's fine, and a wash can go in there. I don't think I've seen this sort of shape on this size before. Then you've got the divots in there, like just at the top of the shin, that goes all the way down. But there's like two or three layers, there's two layers, so it kind of goes down, and then where this knee band that you can just see up here kind of comes in, there's actually a little bit extra that you can see just behind the knee pad. And the knee pad's actually like two layers. So actually when you get from the inside of the leg to the top of this knee pad that you can see here, there's the base, then there's like a strap, then there's a secondary layer to the knee pad, which you can just see there, and then there's the knee pad. And then you come around to the back here, you can just see in that leg there, we've obviously got, I'm trying to keep it in focus for you, like the band for the holster, then there's some rear armor, but there's also a tiny little circle. You can just see it there. Like there's a tiny circle that is like a detail on the armor that's behind the strap. And it turns out that they're not what I spotted in here. These, is it those bits? Yeah, those bits are not lost detail, because actually that's carried on and it's definitely a pattern. It's kind of like indents and overstraps. Yeah, that's definitely part of the model. Then you've got like a really deep cut into that breastplate. And then obviously you come to the skull and the hood and the hose. Like, this tells me, like, Corvus Belli have faith in Unicool, because this is not some simple model that they've gone, oh look, we can do S2s in any material. But then you look at it and just go, well, yeah, but you've basically given me a box. You've given me a blob. Like, this is the Michelin Man. There's no detail on that whatsoever. This, I think, is one of the most detailed minis I've seen from Corvus Belli, full stop. Now, I don't know if half of that is because this Unicool makes it easier to see the details, because when you look at like the white metal, wow, I'm almost getting blinded by how bright that white metal is. Like, it's actually not as easy to see the details on white metal, because you do have those excessive shines on the high points, and even the low points don't get that contrast because they're still shiny. Whereas here on the Unicool, you get those contrasts like so much better, which I think from a prep perspective is going to make this a lot easier to prep, because you're going to be able to see what is potentially a flaw and what is not. I mean, I'm going through this and I don't think, we got one. Okay, I think this is a genuine fault. That gun barrel there, just there. Slight indent on that gun barrel. So I can hold things. Okay, so while I'm complaining that there's a slight loss of detail there, they're individual fingers, and can you see the fingertips? Like, they are individual, they're different lengths, there's detail there, like that is perfect. Then you come to the white metal, and basically on the hands, it's been given up on. Like, they're different, they're basically almost the same length. That's a thumb that you wouldn't be able to tell. There's pointy bits on the fingers. I'm trying to use my finger to help with a bit of contrast there. And there's no definition on the fingertips, like they're just lumps. But because they're at the end of a hand, I think I just assume that that's fingers. And then you come to this Unicool one. Oh my word, that's so good. I think I did this one first, and I don't know why, because I thought this was going to be the area where it failed, and I think I wanted to go into this then saying, but look, it looks good on a tag. Of course it does, it's bigger. But I just cannot believe how good this is in comparison to a white metal mini. I guess this is so good. I mean, there might be some like bubbling in there, but I think that's also the arm is going to come. Which arm is it? Which piece is it? No, not that. That's that arm. Which means if that's that arm, then it's going to be here somewhere. I don't know. There's probably another bit that either I can't see or is in elsewhere. But yeah, from a detail perspective, I'm not curious. Maybe that goes. I don't know. Anyway, this isn't assembly instructions, it's quality analysis. I'm blown away. Maybe I've said that before, but I don't actually say that lightly, because quality on the minis is so important, and I've gotten to so many stages where I've painted a mini. I've got one actually here. Okay, so I'm close to finishing this surrogate, and I got to, where did I get to? Oh yeah, I think it was here in the vents. And you might not be able to see because I've actually intentionally dumbed down the detail here. But just in this top one here, there's kind of like a bridge, I don't know how to like, that isn't there on the other vent. And it annoyed me because it took me all the way to getting to basically this stage of painting this Mini to figure out that that hadn't been cleaned properly and it wasn't prepped very well. And on top of that, I actually got all the way to like painting the face and realised there was still a flashing on there, which I then, even though I primed it and half painted it, I then just ripped it off and started again because it would have bothered me too much if that had still remained on the Mini for the rest of its life. I don't think we're going to have that problem with these Unicool Minis because it's so easy to see the imperfections that there's no issue. Right, so that's the S2. Let's put those back in the box where they're going to stay for longer than any Mini should. Yeah, that goes in there, all sorted. Let's get to the S7s. 7, both S7. Yeah, so there you go. So first up, obviously slight colour variation. You might just be able to pick that up. I've actually got my lights on the bright white so that hopefully that gives you more contrast. So we've got the Agamemnon Siocast here, Unicool Marut here. So let's get a similar aspect. So many bits. Oh my word, so many bits. Okay, that's my first observation. Lots of... I mean, some of these are... That's not a bit of a Mini. That's come off. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Lots of bits. I do love this skull. I love the Marut. Shame I'm keeping my other one, because otherwise I'd love this one. And then what should we compare it to? Let's go leg on leg, because we've actually got like a similar, and that's fairly, there's some detail on there, but it's similar enough. And then I might do the head and then maybe the weapon next. Okay, so let's move that to one side so that you've got some contrast. Let's go legs. Okay. So where are we losing? What are we gaining? What are we losing? So let's look at the Siocast first, because this is everyone's favourite thing to moan about. Can't see. Okay, so typical areas where we see loss of detail would be in things like these dials. You can actually see above it, you might be able to make that out. Like there's just some extra splurth. I don't know what to technically call it, but it's extra. And then we've got a seam that runs up the leg. Can you see? You might be able to see that. Yeah, you can. You can just see the detail there on the ankle. And then that runs, you can see that going on the inside of that pipe. I might just be able to catch that for you. And then that runs all the way up. So that's bigger. And then we can actually see, what we actually see with Siocast, or what I see fair amounts, is detail carryover. I suppose it's kind of like a flashing, but so like here where that should drop off, it actually just, you can see it in two places actually. You can see it there, and you can see it here at the toe where my nail is. It should just drop off into a 90 degree and be undercut. Instead, it's actually elevated beyond what it should be and then just carries on down. And the same thing actually happens on this side, where there's just too much detail and it's carried down onto the element below it. We've then got a really sharp crease for the ankle, for the shin, which at the bottom here just kind of like, again, merges, it splashes into the detail below it, and then we just lose the detail in that Siocast. Now, in most models, I'd accept that as just lost detail. I'd do my best with my knife to carve it out, and because Siocast is so pliable, it's actually a dream to be cutting into. And then you can see as we come around to the top here, we've got that seam that runs through the top. You can just see over that side. And then we lose a little bit of the, like, just the elegance of the detail. Like, you can still make out the shape, which is not as crisp as it could be. So a hobby knife in there will fix that. But then otherwise, like, we don't lose
heaps of detail here. Let's compare that to my favorite place where Cyocast doesn't love LF models is these indents here. Now they've gone for like a, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, an octagonal, like armor element here. And that's all really crisp. There's nothing lost here. Maybe we're losing a bit of like fine detail on this side. If that's intended to be a sharp edge, then that's slightly lost. But then we've got a square and a square and a square, because why not? You can never have too many squares. Perfect. You've got the pipe detailing down here. Perfect. These circles, again, you've got more layers in here. Like, you can kind of see, in a comparison here, the Agamemnon, I don't think the Agamemnon sculpt is as brave in terms of like the multiple layers, maybe because they know they can't do it. You can see up here, like where the exhaust pipes, I assume that's what they are, come into the leg and they just blend. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's fine. And you can actually use paint to create the contrast instead. But here they've used the layers to create the contrast. You know, like the separation is actually what I mean instead of contrast. So to create the separation between the layers and the elements, they've actually just physically layered them differently. Whereas here, you've kind of got a circle that goes into a curve that's lost a little bit of the detail, but you would just paint the elements in there instead. There's nothing, and look, like they haven't just gone for a simple tube here. They've gone for like a ribbed tube just for fun. Kind of like one of those old showers, you know, the metal ones with that twirl around. Similar to that, but with even more detail. And again, the vent behind the hose, where again, you would expect so much lost detail, just maintains it. And I think they've really pushed the limits of this design to lean into the Cyocast. Now, what's interesting here, and this is, I'm gonna grab my other Marut. So luckily you've got a matte black primed Mini to be comparing it to. And I think this is actually more of a fair comparison, but you might just struggle to see some of the really keen details. I think this is definitely a more fair comparison because the sculpts are the same. Like this leg is identical from one to the other. And even now I don't know how much you can see because we're comparing to a matte black Mini, but even right now, it's relatively clear that there's just more crispness. Oh, well, that's not going to help. So one thing I am impressed with is the Cyocast didn't fail on the octagonal inner plate. Where it has struggled is the join between that armor plate and that armor plate. There's extra flashing in there, which we haven't got on the Unicool version of that. Otherwise, the pipework's actually not that bad on the Cyocast versus the Unicool one. Let's go, keep going around. And pivot. Yep, we're not seeing, yeah, there's actually like, there's no difference actually here, which is really impressive. So let's look on the inside. Take back a lot of what I said. The Cyocast is pretty crisp. Gotta stop nudging the camera. Yep, the Cyocast is crisp. Let's see if I can get a similar element. Should we go with the gun? Are there any differences that I can see? Okay, well the Unicool has this bit in the crook of the arm that either the Cyocast doesn't have or I've done a really good job of cleaning it, and I'm not going to go with that being the case. Interestingly, the Unicool has lost that detail there. See that ball kind of thing? Just gone. Gone. Anything else to point out? Everything else actually looks pretty similar. The gun's bigger. The gun's a lot bigger on the Unicool. That looks kind of cool actually. It's a lot bigger. I'm trying to put it behind, but obviously it's not easy to do. I don't know how to do this. So that's them flush to each other. And even like that exhaust barrel, or whatever it is, that cylinder, you can see that it's significantly bigger than the non-limited edition version. The barrels, that's probably a better one. Like, I'll put it behind. That's behind it, and you can see it's a lot bigger. Okay, so this has actually just turned into a, let's spot the difference between the, so the limited edition one is clearly compensating for something because its gun is maybe 10% bigger than the non-limited edition one. But otherwise, in terms of detail, I think we're actually doing a pretty good job of keeping the detail from the Cyocast Marotte and the new Unicool one. So in conclusion, in a very roundabout way, and it took me getting the actual Cyocast Marotte out of my display cabinet where it's at least been primed, it seems to be the bigger the model, the more Cyocast stands up, which is probably why Corvus Belli made the very sensible decision of limiting the Cyocast release to the larger models, because it kind of knew that played to its tolerances and its strengths. However, the thing that I think Unicool has really stepped up is its ability to capture details on the smaller minis, as we can see here. So, in summary, I really like this Unicool for the S2s. I don't see as much of a difference or a move forward from the larger models like the tags with the Unicool, but I also don't see a step backwards. So I wouldn't mind, I would take or leave a Cyocast tag, Unicool tag. They're both much for muchness to me. I would take both of those over metal, because metal tags are heavy. My Zeta fell on my foot once and I thought I'd lost a toe. But when it comes to the S2s, I think my preference would be to have the Unicool one, because again, it's nice and light. I know that if I break it, if I drop it, it's not going to do any long-lasting damage to a mini that has this much detail, whereas I live in constant fear of dropping my Cornac with this big double-pronged sword, because that's going to hurt when that bends, and I've got to try and bend it back, and eventually it's going to snap, and it's not quite going to glue back together with quite that detail. So I would happily take a Unicool S2 over a metal S2 any day of the week. And I'm very glad that they didn't try and do Cyocast for S2s, because I just don't think that would have done very well. It's up to you, obviously. They have said that they're going to put on the store what the differences are, so you basically just decide for yourself. What do you think about the Unicool detail? Do you think it's good enough? Do you think it's better than the Cyocast? Drop that. Or do you think it's a step backwards and that they should only do metal minis? And if you even think about having a miniature that's not metal, then you're a heathen and you should stop playing all miniature war games forever. Interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Jump in and let me know what you think, and I will be back soon with another video.